The arrow struck the wooden beam inches from Cordelia's face, its feathered shaft still quivering as screams erupted from the settlement around her. She pressed her back against the cabin wall, clutching her infant son Jasper to her chest while smoke billowed from the burning grain stores. The Comanche war party had struck at dawn, and Willowbrook's 37 souls were trapped like rabbits in a snare. "They're coming through the north gate," shouted Mayor Fitzpatrick, his voice cracking. With terror as he stumbled past her doorway, blood streaming from his scalp, Cordelia's heart hammered against her ribs. Her husband Beauregard had left with the other men 3 days ago to trade with the river merchants, leaving the settlement defended by nothing but old men and prayer. Through the acrid smoke, she could see painted warriors moving between the buildings like deadly shadows, their war cries piercing the morning air. She needed to reach the root cellar where the other women and children were hiding, but 20 yards of open ground stretched between her cabin and safety. Baby Jasper whimpered against her shoulder, and she whispered desperate prayers into his downy hair. That's when she saw him, a lone Apache warrior crouched behind the blacksmith's forge, his dark eyes scanning the chaos with calculated precision. Unlike the Comanche raiders, he wore no war paint, carried no scalping knife. His presence here made no sense. Another scream tore through the air as Mrs. Pemberton was dragged from her home, and Cordelia knew she had seconds before the raiders reached her cabin. In a moment of pure desperation, she stepped into the open, locking eyes with the Apache warrior. "Please," she called out, her voice barely audible above the carnage. "Help us." The warrior's gaze flicked from her to the baby, then to the approaching Comanche braves. For a heartbeat that felt like eternity, he remained motionless. Then, with fluid grace, he rose and notched an arrow to his bowstring. His first shot dropped, a Comanche warrior mid-stride. His second sent another sprawling into the dust. The remaining raiders wheeled around, confusion rippling through their ranks as they tried to identify this new threat. "Why?" Cordelia gasped as the Apache warrior moved to her side, his presence both terrifying and oddly protective. His English was broken but clear. "Comanche kill my people too. Enemy of enemy is friend," she finished, understanding flooding through her. He nodded grimly. "I save your people, but I want promise." "Anything," she breathed, watching him reload with practiced efficiency. His dark eyes found hers, and something in their depths made her stomach clench with foreboding. "When this is over, you come with me. You be my woman." The words hit her like a physical blow. I can't. I'm married. Your husband may be dead. Your settlement will be ash. You choose watch your people die, or give me what I ask." Cordelia looked at the burning buildings, heard the terrified sobs of her neighbors, felt her son's tiny fingers clutching her dress. The Apache warrior's bow was their only hope against the dozen Comanche braves still terrorizing Willowbrook. "If you save everyone," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I'll go with you." The warrior smiled, but it held no warmth. "Then we have deal." The Apache warrior who told her his name was Ayana, meaning eternal bloom, moved through the settlement like death itself. His arrows found their marks with supernatural precision, each shot carefully calculated to maximize chaos among the Comanche raiders. But it wasn't just his skill that amazed Cordelia. It was his tactical brilliance. He didn't engage the enemy directly. Instead, he used the settlement's layout against them, forcing the Comanche into kill zones where his bow gave him every advantage. When 3 warriors cornered him near the church, he vanished into the building only to emerge from the bell tower, raining arrows down on their exposed backs. "How is he doing this?" whispered Jeremiah Cromwell, the settlement's eldest resident, as he and Cordelia watched from the root cellar's concealed entrance. "Apache know every shadow," Ayana had told her earlier. "Comanche fight with rage. I fight with brain." Within an hour, the tide had turned completely. The surviving Comanche raiders retreated across the prairie, carrying their wounded and leaving 5 of their number dead in Willowbrook's dusty streets. The settlement had lost 2 souls, old Henrik the baker and young Timothy Marsh, but without Ayanna's intervention, they all would have perished. As the survivors emerged from their hiding places, they looked upon their savior with a mixture of gratitude and unease. Ayanna stood in the center of the main street, his bow across his shoulders, waiting with the patience of a man who knew his due would be paid. Mayor Fitzpatrick approached first, his wounded head bandaged with torn fabric. "We owe you our lives, Apache. Name your price, we have silver, furs, whatever you need." Ayanna's gaze never left Cordelia's face. "I have what I came for." The mayor's confusion was palpable, but Cordelia felt the eyes of the entire settlement upon her. Her promise hung in the air like smoke from the smoldering buildings, and she knew there was no escaping it. "Cordelia?" Jeremiah Cromwell's weathered voice held concern. "What's he talking about?" She stepped forward on trembling legs. Baby Jasper still clutched against her chest. "I made a bargain. He saves everyone, and I go with him." The silence that followed was deafening, then erupted into chaos. "You can't be serious," shouted Meredith Blackthorne, the preacher's wife. "You're a Christian woman. You have duties, obligations." "Her husband will return soon," added Mayor Fitzpatrick. "Beauregard won't stand for this." But Ayanna stepped closer to Cordelia, his presence commanding attention. "Promise was made in blood and fire. Your people live because woman gave her word. You would have her break sacred vow?" Old Jeremiah studied the Apache warrior with shrewd eyes. "What are your intentions with her, son? Marriage by your customs? She will be honored wife. Her child will be my child. She will want for nothing." Cordelia felt tears burning her eyes. The promise had seemed abstract in the moment of terror, but now the reality crashed over her like a winter river. She would leave everything she'd ever known, her friends, her faith, her very identity, to live among strangers in the wilderness. "I need time," she whispered. Ayanna shook his head. "Comanche will return with more warriors. We leave before sun reaches high point." "That's barely 3 hours," protested the mayor. "Then she has 3 hours to decide if promise means anything to her people." As the Apache warrior walked away to tend to his weapons, Cordelia sank to her knees in the dust, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she'd agreed to. Around her, the settlement buzzed with heated discussions, but all she could hear was her own heartbeat and her baby's soft breathing. The promise that had saved them all might just destroy her. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity and desperate pleading. While Ayanna sat calmly beneath the old oak tree, maintaining his weapons with methodical precision, the entire settlement seemed to orbit around Cordelia's impossible choice. "There has to be another way," Meredith Blackthorne insisted for the dozenth time, pacing the length of Cordelia's cabin. "We could pool our resources, offer him enough silver to—" "He doesn't want silver," Cordelia interrupted, mechanically folding baby clothes into a worn leather satchel. "He wants me." Outside, she could hear the men debating more aggressive solutions. Mayor Fitzpatrick had suggested overwhelming Ayanna by force, but Jeremiah Cromwell's voice cut through the chatter. "That man put 5 arrows through Comanche hearts at distances that would challenge our best rifles. You want to tell the widows why their husbands died trying to break an honest debt?" Through her window, Cordelia watched Ayanna rise and approach the well. Several children who had been playing nearby scattered like startled sparrows, but he simply drew water and drank, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil his presence created. "Mama Cordelia?" 8-year-old Prudence Whitmore tugged at her skirts. "Are you really leaving us?" The question pierced her heart. She knelt down, taking the little girl's hands in hers. Sometimes grown-ups have to make very hard choices to keep the people they love safe, but we're safe now. The bad men are gone. They might come back, sweetheart. And when they do, we need to remember that promises, real promises, are sacred things. Prudence's lower lip trembled. Will we ever see you again? Before Cordelia could answer, a commotion erupted outside. She rushed to the window to see a dust cloud approaching from the east, riders coming hard and fast. Her heart leaped as she recognized Beauregard's distinctive bay stallion leading the group. "Beauregard!" she cried, and suddenly the cabin filled with people as word spread through the settlement. Her husband and the other traders rode into Willowbrook like avenging angels, their faces grim with the smoke they'd seen from miles away. Beauregard leaped from his horse before it had fully stopped, his eyes frantically searching until they found Cordelia rushing toward him. "Thank God," he breathed, crushing her and baby Jasper against his chest, "when we saw the smoke." You hurt? Is the baby?" "We're fine," she whispered, breathing in his familiar scent of leather and tobacco. "We're all fine." "The Comanche hit us at dawn," Mayor Fitzpatrick explained quickly. "Would have been a massacre if not for his words." Trailed off as Ayanna appeared at the edge of the crowd, having moved with his characteristic silence. Beauregard's arms tightened protectively around his family as he took in the Apache warrior's presence. "This one of the raiders?" Beauregard's hand moved instinctively toward his pistol. "No," Cordelia said quickly. "He saved us, all of us." The story poured out in fragments: the dawn attack, the desperate bargain, the promise that now hung between them like an unsheathed blade. Beauregard's face went through a dozen emotions as he processed what his wife had agreed to in his absence. "You did what you had to do," he said finally, his voice tight with controlled fury. "But I'm here now. The deal's off." Ayanna stepped forward, his expression unchanged. Promise was made. Blood was spilled. Sacred vow cannot be broken because husband returns. "Watch me," Beauregard snarled, his hand now firmly gripping his weapon. But Cordelia placed herself between the two men, her heart breaking as she realized the terrible position she'd created. "Beauregard, don't. He could have let us all die. He chose to help because I gave my word. So now you're choosing him over your own family?" The accusation hit her like a physical blow, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'm choosing to honor a promise that saved 35 lives, including yours, because without his help, you'd have come home to graves instead of a wife." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, 30-odd settlers forming a rough circle around the three central figures. Baby Jasper, sensing the tension, began to fuss against Cordelia's shoulder, his soft whimpering the only sound breaking the deadly silence. Beauregard's jaw worked silently as he stared at his wife, his weathered hands trembling with suppressed rage. "Cordelia, you can't seriously mean to honor this barbaric arrangement." "Barbaric?" Ayanna's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Your woman gave sacred promise to save lives. In my culture, word given in life or death moment is binding before Great Spirit. Who is barbaric, one who honors vows or one who breaks them when convenient?" "Don't lecture me about honor, savage," Beauregard spat, his pistol halfway out of its holster. The word hung in the air like poison, and Cordelia saw something shift in Ayanna's dark eyes, not anger, but a profound sadness that somehow made him more frightening than rage would have. "Enough," she said sharply, stepping forward. "Both of you, enough." She turned to address the entire settlement, her voice carrying across the dusty ground with surprising strength. This man Ayanna risked his life for people he'd never met. He asked for nothing except a promise freely given. Now you want to break that promise because it's inconvenient? "It's not about convenience," protested Meredith Blackthorne. "It's about what's right. You have a husband, a child, a life here. And I'll have none of those things if the Comanche return, Cordelia replied, which they will, now that they know how poorly defended we are. Mayor Fitzpatrick cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we could reach some other arrangement. Gold, horses, trade goods. I told her, Ayanna interrupted. I have what I came for. Promise was not made for gold. Old Jeremiah Cromwell stepped forward, his cane tapping against the packed earth. Son, you seem like an honorable man. But surely you understand taking a woman from her husband, her baby from its father, that's not honor. That's cruelty. For the first time, Ayanna's stoic mask cracked slightly. He looked at baby Jasper, then at Beauregard's anguished face, and something in his expression softened. I lost wife and son to Comanche raid 3 moons ago, he said quietly. When I saw a woman with baby, heard her plead for help, I thought, Great Spirit sent me chance to have family again. The admission fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples of understanding through the crowd. Cordelia felt her heart twist with unexpected compassion for this warrior who had seemed so coldly calculating. But taking a family that already exists won't bring yours back, she said gently. Ayanna's gaze met hers, and she saw the depth of his grief, raw and bottomless as a winter canyon. No, but promise was still made, promise still sacred. Beauregard stepped closer, his anger giving way to desperate pleading. Then I'll take her place. You want someone from this settlement? Take me. I'll serve you, work for you, whatever you need. Beauregard, no? Cordelia gasped, but Ayanna shook his head. Promise was specific. Your woman's word, not yours. The sun had climbed higher during their debate, and Cordelia could see that Ayanna's self-imposed deadline was approaching. Whatever decision they reached needed to come soon, or the choice would be made for them by the Apache warrior's departure. She looked around at the faces of her neighbors, people she'd known since childhood, who had become like family over the years of shared hardships and small joys. Then she looked at Beauregard, the man she'd pledged her life to before God and congregation. Finally, she looked at baby Jasper, innocent and helpless in her arms. I need a moment alone with my husband, she said. Ayanna nodded curtly. Son will reach High Point soon. Choose quickly. As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, giving them space, Cordelia drew Beauregard aside, her mind racing toward a desperate plan. There might be another way, Cordelia whispered urgently as she and Beauregard huddled beside the burned remains of the grain store. But you have to trust me completely. Beauregard's eyes searched her face desperately. Cordelia, what are you thinking? He's grieving. Lost his family to the same Comanche who attacked us. What if? She paused, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. What if we could give him something more valuable than a broken promise? I don't understand. Cordelia drew a shaky breath. The Comanche will return. We both know it. They'll bring more warriors, and next time we won't be so fortunate. But what if they didn't come back at all? Recognition dawned in Beauregard's eyes. You want him to protect the settlement permanently. More than that, I want him to help us build something stronger, an alliance. She shifted baby Jasper to her other arm, her mind working frantically. Think about it, he knows their tactics, their movements. He could teach our men to fight properly, help us fortify the settlement. In exchange, double quotes, in exchange for what? A place to belong. A new family not taken by force, but chosen freely. Before Beauregard could respond, they heard approaching footsteps. Ayanna emerged from behind the blacksmith's forge, his bow in hand and a travel pack slung across his shoulders. Time is finished, he announced. We leave now, or promise dies with setting sun. Cordelia stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. Wait, I have a different proposal. The Apache warrior's dark eyes narrowed suspiciously. Promise. Was clear. No changes. The promise was to save us, she said firmly, but saving us once isn't enough. The Comanche will return, you know this. They'll bring 50 warriors instead of 12. My promise to you will mean nothing if we're all dead in a month. Ayanna considered her words, his weathered face unreadable. Around them, the settlers had begun to gather again, drawn by the tension. In their voices, "What do you propose?" he asked finally. Cordelia took another deep breath. "Stay, not as my captor, but as our guardian. Help us build defenses the Comanche can't break. Teach our men to fight like Apache instead of frightened. Farmers, in return, double quotes in return, you become part of Willowbrook, a respected member of our community. And when you're ready, when your grief has healed, you choose a bride freely given, not taken by force." The suggestion caused a stir among the settlers. She could see shock and uncertainty on many faces, but also something else, hope. They all knew she was right about the Comanche returning. Ayanna studied her for a long moment. "You think Apache and white man can live together in peace?" "I think a man who risks his life for strangers has honor enough to be trusted," she replied. "And I think we're all stronger together than apart." "The woman speaks wisdom," old Jeremiah said, stepping forward with surprising firmness. "We've seen what one Apache warrior can do against 12 Comanche. Imagine what he could teach us, given time." "Absolutely not," Meredith Blackthorne protested. "We're Christians. We can't simply invite a heathen savage to live among us." Ayanna's expression hardened at the word savage, but Mayor Fitzpatrick raised his hand for silence. "Meredith, that heathen savage saved your life this morning. I think we owe him the courtesy of considering his proposal." "My proposal," Cordelia corrected. "The question is, will you accept it?" Ayanna looked around the circle of faces, some hostile, others curious, a few openly hopeful. His gaze lingered on baby Jasper, then returned to Cordelia's eyes. "Your husband agrees to this?" Beauregard stepped beside his wife, his arm sliding protectively around her waist. "If it keeps my family safe and honors my wife's word, then yes. And if I stay, if I teach, if I help make this place strong, promise is fulfilled?" "The promise is fulfilled," Cordelia confirmed. "You saved us, and you'll continue to save us." "That's all I ever asked for." For the first time since she'd met him, Ayanna smiled a real smile, not the cold expression he'd worn earlier. "Then we have new bargain." 3 months later, Willowbrook had transformed into something unrecognizable from the vulnerable settlement the Comanche had nearly destroyed. Under Ayanna's guidance, the settlers had built proper fortifications, not just walls, but watchtowers positioned to eliminate blind spots, hidden trenches that would funnel attackers into kill zones, and escape routes that led to carefully prepared strongholds in the surrounding hills. But the physical changes paled beside the transformation in the people themselves. Cordelia watched from her kitchen window as her husband and a dozen other men practiced with bows in the early morning light. Their movements, once clumsy and hesitant, now carried the fluid precision Ayanna had drilled into them over countless hours. Even Mayor Fitzpatrick, despite his advancing years, could now put an arrow through a man-sized target at 60 yards. "Mama, Ayanna's here." Little Prudence Whitmore called from the front door, her voice bright with excitement. Cordelia smiled at the change in the child. 3 months ago, Prudence had hidden behind her mother's skirts whenever the Apache warrior appeared. Now she followed him around like a devoted puppy, absorbing his stories about tracking and woodcraft with wide-eyed fascination. Ayanna entered the kitchen carrying an armload of freshly caught fish, his presence no longer causing the uncomfortable silence it once had. "River runs high today." Fish are fat and lazy. You spoil us, Cordelia said, accepting the offering with genuine gratitude. Though I suppose that's preferable to the alternative. Their relationship had evolved into something. She'd never expected a deep, respectful friendship built on shared purpose and mutual understanding. He had kept his word completely, never once overstepping the boundaries of their new arrangement. In return, she had become his advocate within the settlement, helping smooth the rough edges of cultural misunderstanding. Beauregard, says the Comanche, have been seen near Devil's Creek, she mentioned, beginning to clean the fish with practiced efficiency. Ayanna nodded grimly. They test our defenses, send small groups to watch, to learn. But they see strong walls now, trained warriors. They are. Careful. Are we ready if they come? Ready enough. Your people learn quickly when their lives depend on it. Through the window, they could see the children playing in the settlement's central square, a scene that would have been unthinkable during those first tense weeks. Young Timothy Cromwell was teaching Apache words to a group of his friends, while old Jeremiah sat beneath the oak tree, carving practice arrows under Ayanna's instruction. There's something I wanted to discuss with you, Cordelia said, her tone becoming more serious. About Constance Whitmore. Ayanna's hands stilled in their work. Constance, Prudence's older sister, was a widow of 23 whose husband had died in a mining accident the previous winter. She was also one of the few settlers who had shown genuine curiosity about Apache culture rather than fear or disdain. What about her? He asked carefully. She asks about you, often. Cordelia kept her voice neutral, but she'd watched the way Constance's eyes lingered on Ayanna during his training sessions, had seen the careful attention she paid when he spoke during their evening strategy meetings. She is kind woman. Good mother to her children. She's also quite beautiful, as I'm sure you've noticed. A faint flush colored Ayanna's weathered cheeks. Not my place to notice such things. Why not? Cordelia challenged gently. Our bargain is fulfilled. You're free to build whatever life you choose here. Before he could respond, shouting erupted from the watchtower. Both Cordelia and Ayanna rushed outside to see Tommy Morrison, the settlement's youngest adult at barely 19, pointing frantically toward the northern approach. Riders coming. A lot of them. Ayanna's transformation was instant and complete. The gentleman who had been discussing fish and romance vanished, replaced by the deadly warrior who had saved Willowbrook months ago. How many? He called up to Tommy. 30, maybe more. But ... Tommy's voice carried confusion. They're not Comanche. Ayanna sprinted toward the ladder, climbing to the watchtower with cat-like speed. Cordelia followed more slowly, her heart racing with fear and anticipation. From the elevated position, she could see the approaching dust cloud clearly. The riders were indeed numerous, but their formation was all wrong for a war party. They approached openly, without attempting stealth, and as they drew closer, she could make out women and children among their number. Apache, Ayanna said quietly, his voice carrying a mixture of surprise and something deeper hope, perhaps, or recognition. Your people? Cordelia asked. Some of them. Maybe all who remain. The approaching band crested the final hill, and Cordelia could see them clearly now. They were travel-worn and dusty, their faces marked by hardship, but they carried themselves with the same quiet dignity she'd learned to recognize in AIY and NA.at. Their head rode an elderly man whose bearing suggested leadership, and beside him, a young woman whose resemblance to Ayanna was unmistakable. My sister, he breathed, and Cordelia heard 20 different emotions in those two words. The final test of their new alliance was about to begin. The meeting that followed would be spoken of in Willowbrook for generations to come. Two cultures, separated by language, custom, and centuries of mistrust, stood face to face in the settlement's central square while the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty ground. Ayana's sister Itzel spoke rapid Apache while gesturing toward the fortified settlement. Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had traveled far and lost much, but also a fierce protectiveness as she glanced at the 30-odd Apache survivors who had followed her here. She asks if this is trap, Ayana translated for the chief. Assembled settlers. If white men plan to kill us all when we are together. Mayor Fitzpatrick stepped forward, his hands open and empty. Tell her we owe our lives to you. Any family of yours is welcome here, but it was Constance Whitmore who surprised everyone. She approached Itzel directly, her young daughter Prudence clinging to her skirts, and offered the Apache woman a dipper of cool water from the settlement's well. For the journey, Constance said simply. Itzel accepted the water with grave courtesy, then spoke again to her brother. This time, her words carried less suspicion and more curiosity. She wants to know how Apache warrior becomes protector of white settlement. Ayana translated, a slight smile creasing his weathered features. Old Jeremiah stepped forward, leaning heavily on his cane. Tell her it began with honor, her brothers. Honor and a promise kept in blood and fire. As Ayana translated, Cordelia found herself studying the faces around her. The Apache survivors looked hollowed by loss but not broken. There was strength in their bearing, intelligence in their eyes. Among the settlers, she saw fear, yes, but also something else. Curiosity. Recognition that these people might represent not threat, but opportunity. Where will they go? She asked quietly. Ayana spoke with his sister in their native tongue, the conversation growing lengthy and animated. Finally, he turned back to the settlers. They have nowhere left to go. White soldiers destroyed our winter camp. Many died. These are all who escaped. The elderly Apache leader Itzel had introduced him as Nalnish, meaning he works, spoke for the first time. His English was heavily accented but clear. We ask only to pass through in peace. We do not wish to bring trouble to those who have shown kindness to our son. Son? Beauregard questioned. He has become family to this place, Nalnish explained. This makes him our son, and you our relatives. The concept sent ripples of surprise through both groups, but Cordelia felt something click into place in her mind. She stepped forward, baby Jasper balanced on her hip. What if you didn't pass through? She said. What if you stayed? The suggestion caused immediate uproar among the settlers. Meredith Blackthorn's voice rose above the others. Cordelia, what are you thinking? We can barely feed ourselves. But Mayor Fitzpatrick held up his hand for silence, his politician's instincts recognizing opportunity when he saw it. Let her speak. We've all seen what Ayana accomplished in 3 months, Cordelia continued. Imagine what 30 Apache could do. Our defense would be unbreachable. Our hunters would never return empty-handed. Our knowledge of the land would be complete. And in return? Nalnish asked, his shrewd eyes studying her carefully. Partnership. True partnership. Apache wisdom combined with settler determination. A community unlike anything the frontier has ever seen. Itzel spoke rapidly to her brother, who nodded and replied at length. Then she addressed the settlers directly in her accented English. My brother says you gave him home when he had none. You showed honor when you could have shown only fear. But what of your people? Will they accept Apache children learning beside their own? Apache men hunting in their territories? Apache women working in their gardens? The question hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implication. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about creating something entirely new. Constance Whitmore spoke first. My Prudence already speaks Apache words. She's learned more about tracking and woodcraft in 3 months than I learned in my entire childhood. If that's what partnership means, I say yes. And I, added Jeremiah Cromwell surprisingly, these old bones have learned a thing or two from Ayanna. Wouldn't mind learning more. One by one, other voices joined in. Not all Meredith Blackthorne and several others remained silent, their disapproval clear, but enough to constitute a majority. Mayor Fitzpatrick looked around at the faces of his constituents, then at the Apache survivors, and finally at Ayanna, whose expression remained carefully neutral. We'll put it to a vote, he declared. All in favor of offering permanent settlement to our Apache friends? Hands rose slowly at first, then with growing confidence. When the count was finished, the margin was closer than Cordelia had hoped, but decisive nonetheless. Motion carries, Fitzpatrick announced. Welcome to Willowbrook. As the two groups began the delicate process of making arrangements where the newcomers would live, how resources would be shared, what rules would govern their merged community, Cordelia found herself standing beside Ayanna, watching history unfold. Your original promise is more than fulfilled, she said softly. You've not only saved us, you've given us a future we never could have imagined. Ayanna nodded, his attention focused on where Constance was helping Itzel organize supplies for the Apache children. Some promises, he said quietly, lead to better things than we bargained for. 6 months later, Cordelia stood in the same spot, watching Ayanna and Constance exchange vows in a ceremony that blended Apache and Christian traditions. Their union had become a symbol of the larger merger taking place, two peoples becoming one, stronger than either could have been alone. The Comanche never returned to trouble Willowbrook again. Word had spread that the settlement was protected by Apache warriors, and no raiding party was foolish enough to test those waters. Instead, Willowbrook became a beacon of hope on the frontier, proof that understanding could triumph over fear, that cooperation could overcome centuries of mistrust, and at the heart of it all remained a promise made in desperation but fulfilled. In love, a reminder that sometimes the most frightening choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. As Ayanna kissed his new bride beneath the old oak tree, surrounded by Apache and settler children playing together in the dust, Cordelia smiled and whispered a prayer of gratitude for the day she had been brave enough to ask a stranger for help. Some promises, she reflected, were worth keeping no matter how much they frightened you.